Okay. I'm Andy Young, Chair of the Land Use Committee, and I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. I kind of would like to start out by reading the charge the selectmen gave the Land Use Committee. Select a chair, vice chair, secretary. We did that early on, about 10 months ago. I'm the chair. I'm not even sure who the vice chair is. We haven't needed one yet.
I'm right there.
And Jamie, who is not here yet, is our secretary. Tonight's meeting is being recorded. We also have a facilitator through the Mid-Coast Council of Governments, Matt Eddie. He's not able to be here tonight. He has the flu and is under doctor's orders to stay at home, so he'll be unable to attend. Other parts, they asked that the meetings be held at the town office, that we come up with a schedule and duration of our meetings. All meetings be conducted with the town charter, freedom of access, committee roles, all the stuff that kind of go with the town. The submission of minutes, which you actually will find in what I'm going to refer to tonight as the memo. It's not labeled as such, but it says to the Lincolnville Planning Board on it. It's the one that doesn't say draft. There's actually a timeline on the last 4 or 5 pages of the work that this committee has done to date. And so the hiring the facilitator through the Mid-Coast Council of Governments, submissions were put in by different entities. They were chosen, and then Matthew Eddy is the one that has been working with us. And the A, B, C, and D of that, I'll just kind of quickly, it's not written anywhere what I'm reading to you now. I'm just kind of going through what we were asked to do. Explore real-world examples of similarly sized non-residential development. That is something we did right in the very beginning of our committee work, trying to come up with ideas of what was happening in other towns, what other towns had done around franchises and, you know, other commercial entities. Our B was to conduct a public forum for public input. I'll come back to that. That's what we are tonight. C was conduct a workshop with the planning board to solicit planning board input, and then draft proposed amendments to the land use ordinance. We kind of forgot about you guys with B. We've done a lot of work. The reality is that this meeting may have come a little bit earlier. So tonight we're gonna, I don't know how many of you have been paying attention to what we've been doing. Other than Sue at the very first meeting, nobody has actually ever showed up at any of our committee meetings, and they've been well broadcast. So we take it that you trust us, and we've been trying to do everything we can, you know, with what the moratorium was looking at, or trying to keep it within that. So tonight's meeting is really kind of to listen to you guys, and if you have questions about the work we've done to date. The memo, again, the one that doesn't say draft, is an overview that our facilitator wrote up for the planning board to kind of give an idea of our work to date and everything we've done. It's probably the best way to encapsulate what we have done, and it also includes a timeline, the minutes of our work to kind of bring that together. If you want me to go through the process of reading all of that out loud, I can. Or if you guys are well familiar with just reading it here tonight, I'd rather not read the entire thing out loud. So basically, in a nutshell, the committee began looking at what the actual moratorium wording was and legally what we are allowed to do. There are things that are called for in the moratorium that the town really can't do at this point. The selectmen did not charge us with coming up with zoning districts. That has been avoided in this town for a long time. We're kind of basically a general use with a shore, you know, with villages and then the shoreland zoning. But we did not look at, and I'm going to jump right into it right now, we did not look at zoning districts because we felt we weren't charged to do that. The Comprehensive Planning Committee is looking at that right now. Maps will probably be different than what they were previously. So the tack that we took with any type of big box or franchise is more about design and standards around any type of businesses. You cannot forbid any particular business from coming to your town. That would be thrown out of court in a matter of seconds, and the town would lose a lot of money. So I'm gonna be very blunt about that. So there are some, I've heard people in the town would like to have ability to vote on any big store that ever comes to town. It's against the law, you cannot do that, and we as a committee can't come up with that kind of wording. That's just not the way that stuff like that works. What we can do is craft, and I think what we've done is a really good job with that, of our ordinances, the submission standards, the performance standards, the building standards, to kind of tailor things in. The example I'll give, I think everybody in the state probably knows about it by now, is the McDonald's in Freeport. They could not forbid McDonald's. It is against the law. You cannot forbid a company from coming into your town. But you can create performance and design standards that bring it in alignment with a traditional village character. And I think you're gonna find with a lot of the stuff we've done, we've also made Lincolnville inhospitable to a lot of businesses. Just with what is gonna be asked, with people who have a formula business, what they will be asked to do is really gonna make them go to another town pretty quickly. But we can't just put a roadblock up, we're putting roadblocks up, but they're not permanent roadblocks. You can't just block somebody from coming. So the committee that we've had, Terry Moulton and I have served on the appeals board for years. I was on the comprehensive plan. Rick has been a selectman, budget committee, comprehensive plan. Jeannie has been planning board, comprehensive plan, and worked with the town of Camden in the planning department. And Earl currently on the planning board and served a lot of other positions. We've had a well-rounded committee of people who've been involved in land use issues, for the town for quite a while. So I don't know if there's any other comments from the committee, but we're here basically to listen to you guys, to make comments about what you want to see, what you don't want to see. And I'm not sure we can really get into a lot of debate tonight. It's really us gathering information from you guys to take back to our committee meetings to hash out more. So, anybody on the committee have more to add?
I think the most useful section in the packet labeled draft is section 12, which starts on page 31, and it explains the building design and impact standards that we've created. And I think that will help address concerns about size limits and design constraints. That is probably the most important for you to look at and comment on tonight.
In some of our discussions, early on, I had people saying, well, we gotta stop franchises, we gotta stop box stores, we gotta stop this. And I would get this look when I would say, we've had a box store and a franchise in town for close to 40 years. And they'd say, what are you talking about? I'd say Western Auto. When it started, it was part of a franchise. It was a box store. Today, it's our local hardware store, everything else. So we've had an example of that in town. Another example we brought up with the committee was, what if Hannaford starts little mini markets? Would people be as opposed to something like that? No, we're not saying they are. We're not trying to invite them into town. But I'm just trying to give an idea of the things we as a committee had to look at. Would people be as opposed to something like that as opposed to other entities? And so we had to kind of look at it from a lot of different directions. Something Jeannie just mentioned also, was an add to it? Yeah, I can't remember what the heck it was. So, Arlene brought up before some lighting standards. That's the type of stuff we as a committee will gather that information. We can't debate lighting standards here tonight. We're just not equipped to do it. And everybody else is gonna have different items, but we'll bring that back within the committee structure and take a look at it and see what those are. We may find that we're close to them already, or Matt may have more information. He really is our resource guy. And unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight because he was sick. So with that, I guess it's...
What would be an example of the kinds of things you've been able to come up with that would make the town inhospitable?
If a business was formulaic and they want their brick facade and yellow signs and, you know, all these different things that the building standards, where it has to fit in with the neighborhood. The parking and the buffering and items like that to try to hide businesses. What was proposed out here really wouldn't be able to take place. For a lot of different, for probably 10 different ways that, you know, well, probably half of those already existed in our ordinances. Personal opinion, I don't think it would have gone through. I think there would have been enough stuff that they had kind of messed up in their original stuff that it wouldn't have. Personal opinion. So it may be even like another 5 beyond that of the building heights, or I'm sorry, not the building heights, but the visible structure, the parking, the water retention. Those are all areas we've tightened up a little bit more. Keeping materials similar to what's already in the neighborhood.
And
If you've
we
got
got into
clapboards,
building materials, we got into roofing, we got into window placement.
Does that vary by area to area? Because
we
this
have
is
one
very
district in the town.
Pardon?
We have one district in the town. So, Rosa?
People could identify themselves and tell us where they live when they speak, it would be real helpful.
Yeah, what's your name and where do you live?
What's that?
What's your name and where do you live?
I'm Rosa Jennings. I live in a house.
Bruce Comer, High Street. I'm curious about page 32, 12.2, 1.
One, two,
Would that preclude someone clearing a mountaintop and building a house?
This is commercial site plan review.
Only commercial?
This is only commercial site plan review. That's what all of this work has been done under. So, and that's what our charge was under the moratorium and from the select board.
I had a question. Dave Perkins, also on High Street, page 32, just above 12.2, it says, standard franchise design for small box retail, franchise restaurants, fuel and grocery combinations is prohibited. Could you kind of explain?
And McDonald's. So a McDonald's having to change to the Freeport design. We're not prohibiting, but their standard design is what's being prohibited. Rick, did you have, you wanted to?
No, I was just gonna
Oh.
say what you said.
Yeah, okay. We're not rehearsed.
Could you help me get with that's the design?
It's the design. So if you read that, standard franchise design is what is prohibited, not a standard franchise.
Okay.
So we're not prohibiting franchises, which, you know, it's just, it's basically the box
Golden arches,
design.
we're prohibiting the golden
Yeah.
arches.
So why does it say small box retail? Why wouldn't you want it to say all retail or big box retail? It sounds like it applies to small, like, if it's big enough, it sounds like it wouldn't apply, be covered by the.
it would be covered by the other design standards, so. I think this is to bring franchise in when it might not be covered elsewhere.
What that's covering is that the moratorium was about items 4,000 square feet and larger. So this is adding in something that might be 3,800 square feet.
Okay.
That also is prohibited regardless of square footage.
And so the larger franchise buildings are covered other places.
Yes.
Right, and our standards would probably, they wouldn't want to comply with, and that's where we would be unfriendly, is that we're saying you can't come if you're gonna look like that.
Jack Silverio, Parker Road. I just want to say thank you very much for the work you put in. I think it's a great. It's a great work. And that phrase, franchise design, is a really key element in controlling the appearance of buildings in town. Franchise design means that when you, well, the example is when you go by any large commercial development, shopping center, malls, etc., you'll notice that each of the stores in there and restaurants their standard and rather glaring appearance, so that you know when you're going by a McDonald's or a Dunkin' Donuts or whatever, simply by the colors and the appearance. This is their standard franchise design. And it's like asking them to change their trademark, basically. They wanna be able to have you pull over going 50 miles an hour just because you recognize their store or their. So and those are the things which really, I think this ordinance is kind of a new vision of how to control these things, is taking on that key issue of not allowing them to use their standard design, their standard building types, and they just have one that's cookie cutter and they put it everywhere, usually. So it's a really fundamental idea, and I think it's key to controlling how our town looks.
Rick McKittrick, also Street. I just had a question and a comment. I echo everybody's commendation for the committee, because what you're tasked with doing is spreading a whole bunch of needles in a row, and the types of uses that are meant to be controlled, not prohibited, meant to be controlled. Those companies, if you will, or those industries, are very, very good at blowing up ordinances and just plowing right through them. So, it's a tough task to craft something that is not anti-business, but is very much conscious of the character of our town. Another comment would be that I think, in my view, what we're trying to do is not have a proliferation of different commercial uses in different places that are of scale, that one might think, wow, that's a great old 1840 farmhouse. Oh, boy, there's this, or commercial, industrial, or whatever. So, and that's the whole consistency with the neighborhood, if you will. And I don't know what neighborhood means in different towns, but that's, high street houses are spread out all over the place. My neighbor a quarter mile away, that is that home in our neighborhood or not? And I think it's characteristic of all Maine towns, everlasting, that you're going to have a diversity of uses and residences and storage of whole vehicles in the front yard. I mean, that's Maine, and you can't create a Greenwich, Connecticut out of, and I don't think anybody wants to move to Greenwich, borrow $3 or $4 million and move there. But I guess I'm really saying it's a difficult task, and in my view, it's really controlling, not prohibiting. Where things are. I know we don't have districts. That's the way we are. It's just crazy quilt of different large uses here and there.
Yeah. And for those that came in late, I'll get right to you in a second. For those that came in late, as a committee, we did not look at districts. The comprehensive planning committee is looking at districts and the district maps and all of that. We weren't charged to do it, and it really wasn't in our purview to do it. Is it coming? Most of the planning board the land use committee members, I think planning board members too, see districts are probably on our horizon as we get to the new comprehensive plan. But it wasn't a part of this at this moment, so.
I'm sorry, Sandy Cameron, Youngtown Road. I wanted, what Rick mentioned, the neighborhood term, on just quick, read page 31, 32. There's a lot of comparisons to neighborhood. They use the term, I guess, neighborhood. If you guys run into anything that drills down on exactly what consists of the neighborhood, my envisioning is Marriott gets a blueberry field in a remote part of our town and builds themselves a big hotel. That's not a neighborhood. Is it a neighborhood? How do they exchange that comparison within the township itself? Have you heard anybody say, oh, a neighborhood consists of X, or is it just left to?
Yeah, I think it's whatever the closest buildings in proximity. I mean, if it's 20 buildings in 2 miles, it's probably gonna be those 20 buildings constitute the neighborhood. If it's 20 buildings and 200 yards, there's your neighborhood.
Sure, that's a
So
little
that-
easier.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, obviously it's not written in there, but I think common sense kind of just says that's what you're looking at.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Jim Rossi from not Youngtown, Beach Road, excuse me. Thank you for taking this all on. I know it's a lot of work. I think you've done a great job. One question that I had though is it possible to require the developer to conduct an economic impact review? And I ask that question because I'll use this as an example. Let's say Dollar General had come. What would the effect of that store have been on Drake's and other operations? You also think about some of the cottage industries in Lincolnville, the farms. How are they all going to be affected by these types of developments? And I think it's a good exercise for anyone who comes to the town to construct some kind of facility like this, to know what the potential impact could be moving forward.
It never came up within our committee. I think it's beyond anything we can answer tonight. We can certainly take it into consideration, but I don't even know how to begin to answer that one. So.
That's okay.
Yeah, but
Is your question, maybe your question is, do they have the economic means to start and finish the project without leaving
No.
a bunch of junk around, or?
What I want to know is, just as a citizen, you're building this store that sells fruit, that sells vegetables, that sells dry goods, that sells food. What is that impact going to be on the people who do that very same thing, only in different ways? And I think that that's something that anyone who wants to come here and run a business ought to be able to tell you what I think. And I'll use the example, and there probably may be some people in this room that disagree with me, but I think Walmart's a perfect example of it. When they came to even large cities, they completely knocked out all mom and pop businesses because they could sell all of their goods at a much lower price because they were franchises. So how does that impact everyone who lives in the community and relies on selling those eggs and selling those vegetables and the livestock and everything else?
Yeah, I think that gets way beyond performance standards, and I mean, UPS and FedEx are bringing in, they're wiping out retail faster than anybody else could even imagine. And maybe it goes beyond the scope of what we're doing here.
I don't think we can deny one business because of impact on other businesses. It's
Well,
just
I
something
think
that,
the purpose, I'm sorry to interrupt you, is to deny them. It's to know, I think they know when you know. When you start to open your eyes and raise your eyebrows that, hey, this is gonna knock out a whole section of business in the town if this happens, and I think that's an important thing to know, and that's something to be able to negotiate with the.
well, if they meet the standards though, can't turn them down.
We got another question to that.
Yeah, John Vincent's, Lawrence Road. There was a law back in 2008 the state passed to address the very thing that James is addressing tonight, but it was repealed in 2011, I think, on constitutional grounds, I think. But in any case, it was repealed in 2011. And to address what James was talking about, if people are really interested in trying to take that point of view and to do something like that, to have a franchise make a economic impact statement that would cover all those things that James was talking about, we would have to have another law passed or bring that law back into effect. And so I think that would probably be the only way to address those kinds of issues.
Two questions quickly. Will there be minutes of this meeting, or how are you recording these particular suggestions or concerns?
Everything is being recorded tonight, the mics are live. I probably ought to have everybody going to that. I'm hoping it's gonna pick up
Okay,
everybody, but yeah, we're being recorded.
Okay, good, because there's some really good suggestions.
Mhm.
But apropos this question about economic impact, we already have, I believe, in our broader ordinance, and in most ordinances, there are things that, prohibit or at least for consideration, whether a particular use will have a deleterious or noxious, or, otherwise negative effect on adjoining properties. I think that's the first cousin of considering economic impact. So I don't think there's a complete across-the-board constraint on this type of consideration. I'm not trying to speak legally, I'm not a lawyer, but, there are, I think, if nothing else, this type of consideration is a way to evaluate, not prohibit, but evaluate. And, so many of these standards are amorphous, but why not, require that as a precondition to a decision?
And what would you call it? Economic impact?
So,
Economic impact review.
Yeah, as I said, we can take into consideration, but we can't even begin the process of discussion or answering that, but we certainly can take it into consideration. And tell you the truth, we're gonna run that by Matt, who's our facilitator, and he's gonna give you 30 examples right away of, 2011, it was done out, you cannot do that, or he may say, yeah, here's a town that does something very similar. Yeah, or somewhere in between. Sue?
Well, competition is probably the way of our life here, and you may not be able to do anything about that, but that's part of the reason why so many people were concerned about the Goral, Palmer, possibly Dollar General proposal, was because it was right across from Drake. So out of loyalty to Drake's, there was a lot of concern, and one of the why this whole process has been kicked off. I just want to say I'm so glad that Lincolnville has the services of Matt Eddy. He's worked on this his whole career, and if you'd like to go to the Midcoast Council of Governments website, you can tune into a Zoom conference they did with Randall Arunt, who's the master of design standards, lives in Brunswick, friend of Matt Eddy. You can watch that, zoom in, and just have such an edification. They'll show you lots of pictures of what places could look like, and then with design standards, what they had to look like. So I think you're doing a very effective job. And as you know, you are the land use committee. It's kind of like a legislative body. And then it will a permit, or an application for a permit will go to the planning board, which is like the judicial body. And ideally, we have 3 branches of government, and so it's that planning board that would be the ones to have the conversation. Now, when Goral Palmer came here, first of all, it was the audience who was asking the important questions. Where is your parking lot going to be? Why is it not in the back? Where is your land? Where is your buffer? Where is your landscape plan? Those questions were not being asked by the planning board. So when we finally approve design standards as voters, then I hope that there'll be some kind of checklist that the planning board will have, that they will have to go through these steps of asking all those questions, because that's the conversation that has to happen. It doesn't go to the code enforcement officer. It's up to the planning board to grant the permit and what kind of permit. And this one, everybody has to know there are openings on the planning board.
So to address that question, we actually are going to be developing checklists that go with the performance standards, the design standards, the submissions that have come in. And they actually are going to lead to another form, which is the finding of facts. The planning board, I guess at this point, doesn't really do findings of fact on each of those items. The appeals board does. Anytime we have something that comes to us, we have to have findings of fact, because there's a possibility it's going to be litigated. But kind of the hope, and it's written into our memos in different areas here, that there will be checklists when our work is said and done. The planning board will have a checklist that will allow them to kind of go through all of the different pieces, and when it comes time for the actual vote, there'll be findings of fact on those. So,
Rosie Gary, please keep in mind that no matter what committee it is, whether it's the select board or planning board, any of these groups have a set of guidelines. Those guidelines are what your feet are held to the fire
that's what those committee members have to go by. It's not because you come and say, I think we ought to have this or do that, they're gonna take that into consideration. It's whatever they have for a set of guidelines, am I correct?
Very much so.
Yeah.
And Matt, Eddie explained to us that he's working on finding of facts to outline the procedure that the board will go through, and every fact that needs to be found is gonna be up front, so that the applicant is aware of what the board's gonna be looking at, and the board is aware what they have to look at. And that's how he's explained it to us. We haven't seen those yet incorporated into our draft, but
Yeah.
that's what we're expecting.
And those I think will come when we get closer to a final document. I mean, we have a draft, for him to start doing checklists on something that may be eliminated later on, so those will kind of come at the very end of the process. Sorry, Ian.
Hi, Jennifer Temple, Atlantic Highway. And building off of, I guess, what Rosie said, I'm curious, in your conversations with or researching what other towns have done, is I'm wondering if you've learned, or if you haven't learned, if you might still have time to learn, how often do these things need to be revisited? Because it seems like we're in this situation because we were kind of blindsided, and thank goodness people were able to come together, and the select board was able to act, and y'all were able to fill these positions. But what would happen, in 2 years from now, when franchises no longer need the Golden Arch? Like their plans have changed. So how, is there a timeline, or how can we continue to be responsive so that we're not kind of behind the 8 ball?
I think that's probably, first question for the selectmen, is the land use committee gonna continue after this? We were charged very specifically with this redrafting of the commercial site plan review. If the land use committee is a continuing entity going into the future, and I think with a comprehensive plan, both the old one, there are things in there people are talking about trying to implement, and the new one coming out, there may be even more items that need to be implemented. Other than a couple of minor items, our last comprehensive plan, 99.9% of it went, nothing ever got done. Nothing was ever done. So will that happen with the next one? That's hard to say. But I think there are a bunch of changes possibly coming down the road. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Lincolnville is at a terrific fork in the road right now, or change of course perhaps regarding its development. With the community heart and soul, we learned a great deal about what people like and don't like about the town, mostly what they like and why they want it to be the way it is. And with the new comprehensive plan coming about, it's a real good chance to implement some of these things. And I just wanted to say that the traditional idea of zoning, and particularly commercial zoning, is use-based. In other words, things of one use go over here, things of another use go over there. It's like commercial's over here, industrial's over there, residential is over here. And it's created a rather chaotic look to many towns where there's all the things you don't like noisy, trafficky things over in one area, and people really have to suffer going through those areas. It divides the town up. So I'm very glad to hear that you weren't given a charge to create a commercial zone. It's a really difficult thing to do in towns that struggle with this, and the automobile has made it, possible, but you want to eat something, you have to get in your car to go over to that side of town. But it's really made towns very, I think, divided and just inhospitable. I mean, if you take the model of European towns, they're all multi-use, particularly buildings. I mean, there could be multi-use examples where that kind of, use-based zoning is not working as well. I think it's not mutually exclusive from design-based zoning, which is what we're sort of heading towards here, because we know that we can't legislate against, certain uses in town, but we can make it so that those uses have to kind of fit the town, kind of have the same characteristics as the town, perhaps, as the neighborhood. So design-based standards are really a wonderful way to go. Not too many towns have adopted them, but they're becoming more and more popular throughout Maine, and they're a really good solution to rural towns, because we're wide open right now. And here's a way to work with having some say in the appearance of our town and the future of its development. So I think I commend your work. I mean, you're really on the right track with design-based standards. I don't, if for some reason there needs to be some use-based zoning, I think you can still have the design-based standards on top of it. They're not mutually exclusive. But anyway, I think it's a great time for our town to take some control of things, just in the nick of time, perhaps, and really continue to have a town we really love and love the way it looks.
Jack, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
How do you have use-based standards without districts?
About what?
Districts. How can you?
You can have them right across the whole town.
Right, so we do have uses that are allowed,
Yeah.
but they're not allowed.
Right.
So how do you get to the point?
You just apply the design-based standards
Right, that,
when you have an application for a small business in our general zone.
right. I thought you were saying if that didn't work, the use-based standards might back it up, and that's what maybe I misunderstood what you were saying.
No, I doubt it. That's kind of putting it backwards, or, I think it's more likely that design-based standards could be applied anywhere in town for any kind of use. And that's the way the town is developed. I mean, it goes all the way back to the family farm, which had commercial, residential, and industrial aspects to it. They were all blended together. But we didn't have to worry too much at that point about the appearance of it, because farms, churches, stores, all pretty much look the same. They're bigger, smaller, whatever. But there was a commonality throughout the appearance of the town. And I think that's perhaps what the community heart and soul people who were involved in that started to want for the future of the town. Multi-use, it's not districting, multi-use, but some standards for controlling the appearance and use and the light, lighting, sound.
Mr. Silverio, can I glean from what you've been talking about? It kind of made me think about something that you're saying. Don't be careful what you ask for. If you designate a growth area or an industrial area or something like that, you're going to get something that you otherwise wouldn't even imagine to get if you just left it in the general zone and used standard based. And that's what I think. That's my big takeaway from what you're saying, and I never thought of it that way. Thank you.
It's basically giving them carte blanche to do whatever they want to if they're over
Yep.
there.
So,
I
Rick?
think just I could ask, take a little bit of issue with Jack. sufficient with respect to any use, for example. You could have a hog rendering operation, okay, which many people would think would be great. If that operation met the design standards, I would submit that it's not necessarily appropriate everywhere in town. A mini oil refinery, which met design standards, I'm guessing, I'll ask Jack, would not be something that you would consider appropriate, even though the design standards were met, am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
And a Dollar General that wants to go the trouble of meeting our design standards can build here. So that's the drawback.
I'm David Merck from over on Carver Lane. And I wonder, I'm sorry to be coming in so late on this process, but I'm wondering whether the committee stepped back and said abstractly, what is it that we don't want here? What are the things that we're objecting to? Would we object to the design issues as much if we didn't think that they threatened too much competition, or that they attracted the wrong behaviors, or that they whatever? And I don't know what those underlying phenomena are. So to some extent, whether it's design, whether it's use, it seems to me that we're taking a kind of an indirect approach, and probably have to whatever it is that we're trying to control, that we may not be able to control.
You gotta remember, Dollar General is what galvanized everybody.
Sure.
Within the people that were against Dollar Generals, as soon as I was named the chair of the land use, I got a lot of phone calls and people stopping me in stores and everywhere else. And I probably heard 15 different reasons why we didn't need a Dollar General. Some of them opposite each other. Not everybody is on board with the exact same reasons of why they don't want to have something. I heard everything, we don't want a corporation in here. The money goes overseas. We don't want that ugly looking design. We don't want something putting out of, by the time it was done, people were coming at it from so many different directions, and not all of them were in agreement on the same thing. So as a committee, we did take a step back, we took a step back and looked at history-wise. Would we have shot down Western Auto? If this was in place, would we have shot down Western Auto 30 years ago, 40 years ago when it went in? What other types of businesses? I grew up in the farming family. After the cow barns burned down, my uncle went into hens. What would people's reaction today be to a 12,000 square foot hen barn with the silos running to get the grain in that you could hear all over town, and the smell and all of that? I mean, a lot of us grew up with that but today so we did take a step back. It's like, what are we trying to control and stop? Because things change so often.
What if John Deere wanted to put in a showroom in that same location? I bet it would be reacted to very different.
Very much, a good possibility. Again, although that site, for a commercial entity in that site, I think it already was problematic, and may have been, not met muster of the planning board. It definitely would not now. And I don't think a John Deere dealership showroom would pass in that location either. We can't, we just can't say no to Dollar General and come up with a list of 100 corporations we don't want to see in Lincolnville. I heard somebody describe it. I'm going to step back even further. There were a lot of people that were against MBNA when it came here. And I heard somebody one time say, we all in our comprehensive plans described MBNA to a T, didn't even know it existed, and when it moved in, we tried to drive them out. Our comprehensive plans talked about good paying jobs with insurance. That was unknown in this area. Unless you worked with a hospital, you did not have full-time employment, you did not have health insurance, you did not have benefits, and as soon as it came here, everybody wanted to go away. We don't know what's coming down the pike. So as a committee, we kind of had to take that step back and say, what's the crystal ball? And the crystal ball is design and performance standards for anything coming down the road. We can't stop it, we can't legislate against it, but we can try to get it to fit our community. So, anybody else wanna take on that one too?
I think what we did ask ourselves is what do we not want to stop? And that would be things that people might want to come here, like a Hannaford mini store if they were to be. So we decided the design standards would give us the protection. They'd have to meet those, but they would probably be more likely to, I mean, Hannaford and Camden met some of the roof line. It may not be exactly what you want to see, but they made an attempt to make some design changes, and so.
Another example would be the pharmacy in Camden.
Rite Aid or whatever it is now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whichever,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they adhered to.
They did the
Yeah,
same thing.
but we knew that there would probably be some stores that people would welcome. And, so we think the design standards will not necessarily stop them.
I just commented, I'm thinking the first time I heard any conversation about this, maybe 50 years ago. 50 years ago, everybody in this room would have been saying, it's none of your damn business what I do with my property.
Exactly.
Get out of my face. So this evolution is really gratifying. There are still people who feel that and maybe should, as long as they're, not endangering anybody or so on and so forth. So I'm not criticizing that attitude, but this is how towns mature and grow sensibly without saying, stay away from us. So it's difficult, but it's really refreshing. So thanks again.
How long is your committee gonna stay as a unit and operating? Is this just a finite, one-time deal?
Well, that's up to the select board.
Yeah.
We are a finite deal under the charge of this moratorium issue. There are discussions taking place because there are a bunch of other issues facing the town. And it's kind of like a list of 4 or 5 items another selectman has seen about different things that have to be changed in the land use ordinances, so. But that's up to the select board. As far as what we're doing with this in our schedule, we're hoping for another workshop with the planning board, and maybe by the first of the year, actually begin to start to put out more than just a draft, but something that will go to the selectmen. They then have to have it sent out for a legal look, and then possibly get it out in time for the town meeting. But if we get behind in that, we're gonna have to apply for another extension. And we can, as long as we can show work is happening, and I hope you guys would agree, work is happening, we could extend this for the next 30 years. It's gonna be a completely different committee within a year, I guarantee it, because they're gonna be tired of it. But the committee itself is willing to keep going, and keep doing more. But, this issue hopefully is coming to head in the next couple of months, and, we'll taking input that we've heard here tonight, whether it's the impacts, the economic impact standards, whether it's lighting. Before everybody came in, somebody passed out, or Arlene passed out, some updated lighting standard. We'll take a look at that as a committee. That's a pat answer to say we're gonna take into consideration, but that's really all we can do. We'll take into consideration anything that's said here tonight, and we've got to get guidance on it and do our own studies on it. So, to see a hand over here. No, okay.
Dave Perkins, on page 32, you have a statement that says, flat roofs are not permitted. And so I had a couple of questions about that. When you say flat, if you had a flat roof that was pitched, is that allowed? If it had a little bit of
I'll put a question mark next to that one too.
And the other question I had was, would that pertain to, accessory buildings? So if you had a business that we like, and we don't want to discourage, but it has like a storage building that had a flat roof, would that be absolutely prohibited? So you might want to clarify.
Again, I think all of those as a whole get taken into the design standards. The next one's about the rhythm of the neighborhood, the rhythm of spacing and stuff like that. So, those are the broad questions that the planning board will look at as it comes to.
Right, but when it says prohibited, then there's no discussion, that's my point.
Well, if it's a
So just have it.
accessory building and it comes underneath the threshold for review, then I'm not sure the standard would apply.
Okay.
Okay, Sue?
Susan Silverio on Proctor Road. I hope you're all enjoying this process, and I hope you feel our appreciation. I hope you continue. Isn't the Land Use Committee a chartered committee? I know there's a moratorium that's in place for 180 days at a time, possibly indefinitely, but I believe the committee is a standing committee that you have 3-year terms.
It's been inactive for 5,
Well, I know that.
6 years.
Now you're.
So
now
I
you're-
don't, the select board would have to agree that they want to keep it active.
Oh,
Yeah,
but I think, isn't it a chartered committee, which means it is a standing committee, not an ad hoc committee?
we kind of feel like an ad hoc committee at this point, in that we received one charge to look at items. And I'm not sure what none of us have really been on a land use committee before, is that correct?
No, I have.
Yeah, I have.
So in the past, I mean, you went under a charge if something needed to be changed or looked at or added. You didn't come up with your own ideas.
No.
Right.
Sometimes we did. Yeah.
Sometimes.
Often we did.
Yeah.
But
Would you
we
run
would-
with it, or would the selectmen then
No,
give
take
you
it to the select
Yeah,
board.
okay, so
Yeah.
everything has to go to the select board.
That was-
It might, ideas
That
might
was
be generated
telecommunications,
here,
but I-
but it always has to go to the
Yeah.
select board to receive the charge of take a look at this or take a look at that.
There was
So-
real good communication.
I think you might find a charge in the charter, but never mind. But some things have already been mentioned today, which we could eventually, with a new comprehensive plan, consider ridgeline protection for not only commercial but also residential. So those are the kind of things that I hope you all stay interested in and involved in.
I just heard half my relatives that were in the line with what Rick said of leave my damn property alone. Just rolling over in their graves as you said some of that stuff. Sandy? Oh, I'm sorry, over here first.
Yeah, it's Jim Rossi from Beach Road. I know where I live now. In section 11, would it be possible to consider adding, using green infrastructure for stormwater management and parking lots of any design? What a lot of these companies tend to do is put everything underground, and you have this just big vast expanse of paved area.
So where is it you're referring to?
It would be item number 7, section 11, in parking lot design.
So 11-7.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
What page number are you on?
It's the other memo.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm in the memo.
Oh.
You're on the memo?
Yeah, sorry.
11.3.7.
11.2F, landscaping for parking lots, what they're suggesting, the 100-year storm event. I'm just, these days, a lot of these construction projects are using green infrastructure. It's very effective in managing stormwater and also looks a heck of a lot better than just having a tank under the ground. Requires some maintenance, but aesthetically, it just looks so much better.
Where's my page numbers?
So, yeah, we didn't, I think the designs, whether they put it under the parking lot, whether it's, something that's visible, different other type of things. The maintenance item is something we actually got onto and wanted to know for ourselves. If we do have a number of places that have stormwater treatment, who's actually checking to make sure those are running and adequate on a yearly basis? And the code enforcement officer said that actually is something that he does and is supposed to do. So obviously, if we have too many of them, we're probably gonna have to go into a computerized system to track them. But I think it was a question that came up within the board in our discussions, who actually takes care of these things, so. Sandy, you got a question?
Yeah, there's been a tremendous amount of information here, and I'm trying to catch up really quickly, so if these are dumb questions, please excuse me, but you guys have done a really great job here so far. Over here, starting into page 39, we're talking about outside development, ridgeline protection, shoreline development. was there any thought, or maybe it wasn't even part of your charter, we've been talking structures and buildings and parking lots, was there anything for, wind turbines and solar farms of commercial capacity? Anybody thought of that at all about?
Again,
That would be a
this
separate-
was,
New section, wouldn't it?
what's that?
That'd be separate.
That would be separate, those are
Separate from
different
this
part of our
project here
ordinances,
then.
yeah.
Yep, that's, okay.
Yeah, this is commercial site plan review. You know, so this is what we are limited to. There are separate ordinances that take care of a multitude of cell towers and items like that that are separate from this. So.
Thank you.
We don't have a wind turbine ordinance,
No, we don't.
a wind ordinance, which means the states would apply. So if citizens think it's something that needs to be done, then
Yeah.
somebody needs to be charged with creating that ordinance. They're,
Yeah,
they're,
thanks. So if we don't have that, that's a hole that, or a gap, maybe that is an addition outside of this.
yeah, I think that what would happen is the state would end up reviewing it, but I'm not positive. It's been a while since I caught up with that, but
My guess is a petition would start around town, a moratorium would start, and then the land use committee would have a new charge. Just taking a wild guess. Jack?
Yeah, I hope that once this goes on to the planning board, that they will start to welcome the kind of perspective you're giving. I think there's real hesitancy, that they feel that a lot of these things are a little too subjective, that they don't quite know how to, you know, bring the will of this document into practice, into putting it before the applicant is standing before them.
we have a planning board member on our,
Right,
on our
Sure.
team.
right.
Good. So my point is that basically it's gonna take a new kind of way of processing, I think, applications. Not enormous, but it is going to take a bit of a attitude adjustment, I think, so that there will be this welcoming of things which may seem to be a little arbitrary, a little more subjective, and a little harder to enforce. And I hope that this can go into that stage and come out with everybody not brawling about it. So it's going to be a good trick, this next phase, I think.
This is Lynn Travis, Youngtown Road, just sort of back on the solar farm, question, and, commercial solar farm, we have one in town. I believe that's commercial, up there on, yeah. And so, if another company comes in and decides that they wanna cover the blueberry fields with a solar farm, are there any guidelines for like what's gonna happen there? We've got a lot of open land in Lincolnville.
It would have to go through site plan review, I believe, because of the square footage that would be covered.
But
And
there's no-
then some of those, things wouldn't be applicable, some of the design standards. So
We have strengthened the stormwater requirements, and we've added for phosphorus,
Mhm.
and I think some of that would apply. We also have, I consider them junkyards myself, and we have a junkyard ordinance. Right, says something about junkyards in there.
It will be a junkyard until it's 25 years.
Right, and as far as the windmills go, we also have vibration,
noise and vibration.
yeah, noise and vibrations, page 36. So that takes into that would probably take care of the windmill right there, because I've got a little bit of experience on Vinyl Haven. I have a friend who lives in the middle of the island. The windmills are 2 miles away and the vibration comes through the basement constantly, and there's nothing they can do. And we don't want, you know, we don't want people's homes to be ruined with vibrations.
Sandy?
You guys got tangled up with the ferry service upgrades there on the beach? Okay, so you're kind of working over here and the state's doing their own thing over here, because
Yeah.
there's been some conflict already with lighting, parking, or questions.
I
should
wish
say.
we had some review of some of those things, design standards, but they can pretty much do what they want
Yeah,
to
the
do.
state does whatever they want to, we've been told that.
Calling it a meeting, or are you raising your hand?
I must say, I'm really impressed with the turnout this evening.
Yeah.
I thought maybe 3 or 4 people. So thank you all for being interested enough to come out on
Thank you.
cold night. If you go through, now that you have in writing these standards, and you have comments, please send them to us. We have an email at the town office, land use at Lincolnville, Maine.
David checks it every once in a while. We tried to get it onto my phone and we couldn't do it, so we need the tech guy to do it. Oh, yeah, we'll find it.
While he's doing that, you had a comment about green infrastructure.
Yes.
If we added a sentence that, to encourage, it does have, there is a qualifier that it's to blend the environment and the built, for the natural and the built environments, but to say that options for green infrastructure
Well, I've seen
are.
it done so many different ways.
Oh, yeah, there are
where
so many.
Some towns and cities actually require a certain amount of, a percentage of green infrastructure on the site plan.
Oh,
Yeah.
Some towns encourage it, but as I said before, I don't need to keep repeating myself, it's just a much better looking way to manage stormwater.
thank you for that percentage. That's a, do you know towns that do? By any chance, you said? Just
No, but
from,
I can dig some up for you.
that's
Yeah.
okay. I thought if you knew off the
Yeah.
top of your head.
Yeah.
So the
Matt-
email, it's landuse@town.lincolnville.me.us. And there should be a link on the website also.
Did you say that again?
So, landuse@town.lincolnville.me.us.
Thanks.
It's on the town website.
What's that?
It's on the town website.
I believe there should be a link
Yeah,
on the town website
Under
for that same
land use
email.
committee.
Yeah, you just go to committees, go to land use committee, and then your page opens up, all your names are there, and there's a phone number and the email address, a link.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? I don't have a gavel to adjourn, I'm supposed to say we get to adjourn.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you everybody for coming up. Fire permit.